All right, my friends, welcome back to the Reisinger build. That's right, this is our house we've been building for y'all, start to finish with our friends at Builders First Source, and we are at a critical junction in this project. All the insulation is in the bays, and we're gonna be talking about some nerdy details on what we need to have in prior to moving on to sheetrock. Now you can see here in the kitchen, we've got some phenomenal blocking. You can kind of see the cabinet layout from our friends at Benchmark Kitchen and Bath. But if you look at the 3D renderings on this house, like the fly-through that BFS did, there is a lot of stuff that's going to be happening in future phases between cabinets and built-ins. We've got a hidden door coming up. There's just a lot that needs to go on in this house. And so on this episode, my partner Tim Hill and I are going to run through our checklist of everything we need to make sure that's in place prior to moving on to the sheetrock phase. A lot of good details and a lot of things that you may not have thought about in this episode. We're going to run through the whole house and the garage as well. With that being said, the Reisinger build, all about what we need to do pre-sheetrock. Let's get going.
A Build Original series in partnership with Builders First Source. The Reisinger build.
All right, y'all, you guys have met my partner Tim Hill before. Tim's been building at least 10 years longer than me, but Tim, we got a lot of knowledge to dump on these guys for this important phase of pre-sheetrock. Why don't we start here in the kitchen?
Sounds good.
So our guys at Benchmark did a great layout for us, gave us shop drawings. Of course, we have that amazing 3D rendering from our friends at BFS. But I got to tell you, when we had this house on the Build Show live tour, everyone commented about our kitchen blocking. Talk to me about what we're doing here with these zip sheathing blocks.
Well, cabinets are probably the most important thing to block for because they carry a lot of weight and a lot of precious cargo, if you will.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And so typically most workspace cabinets are 36 to 38 inches tall.
Yep.
And so the blocking for them needs to accommodate that top 6 inches of the back of the cabinet.
Yep.
And then the upper cabinets, typically in a 9-foot, 8-foot ceiling, as you've mentioned before, drop all the way from the ceiling down to an area 18 to 19 inches above the lower countertop.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so the blocking for the upper cabinets needs to be at the top and the bottom of the upper cabinets.
Got it. So that's why we got to block in both locations.
Right. Here, Nathan's done a great job of using pocket screws on nice 5/8 inch thick plywood all the way across to make sure that there's plenty of substantial screw support for all the cabinets.
Yeah, this was just left over from our roof sheathing, this 5/8 that we've got here.
Right, it would have been scrap otherwise.
And what I actually want to buy in the future, Tim, for the shop is, or for the job site, my buddy Zach Detmore, in his cargo van, has a Foreman jig, the Craig jig, that instead of using the drill driver like we're using on the job site here, he actually can just zip them right out for blocking. Yeah. We need to buy one of those in the future. But for now, Nathan drilled all these. And, you know, these went in relatively quickly, and boy, we've got a lot of solid blocking. Now, most of the time on your cabinets, uppers or lowers, they're actually screwing in that cabinet a couple inches below the line because there's usually a 3/4 rail in the back of the cabs. So that's why these are lowered a little bit from our countertop height. And this house, we're doing kind of standard countertop height, I believe 36, right?
That's correct.
My house, I actually went to 39 at my house when I built it because my wife and I are both tall. So you need to make sure that you understand where your height is going to be on the top of those cabinets so you can put those blocks in the correct location. Now I'm noticing we don't have any blocks for electrical. That's really not necessarily to do anything for electrical, right?
No, not unless you have a unique location of a plug or a switch box that's not attached to a framing member.
Yeah, it makes sense. And one thing I do want to point out too, we know ahead of time our tile selections here and our box depths. If you didn't know that, you might consider adjustable boxes in your kitchen that you can adjust the depth with just a screw. Arlington makes those. They can be quite handy for you. Anything that we need to think about for blocking and ceilings in this area, Tim?
Now, not particularly in this job. I'm sure there are other jobs. If we had chandeliers or heavy light fixtures hanging from the ceiling, we'd need to be blocking for those.
I did notice that Rick, our electrician, though, put a solid block in
for the chandelier here in the dining room.
Yeah,
yep.
And there's really nothing special going on there. Just a 2x4 with his box mounted correctly on that. That's going to be nice and solid for his chandelier. Now, as we walk into this main space, I'm noticing you've got some red spray paint on the wall. What's happening here where this TV's
Well, we
going?
have 3 televisions, wall-mounted televisions in the house, one in both living areas and one in the master. And so we want to do some solid plywood backing for those television brackets because some of these modern televisions are pretty heavy and pretty good size.
Yeah, that's smart. I also like that this Owens Corning actually takes a spray paint really nicely, so you can really tell where you wanted it. Now, one block, Tim, that I talked about in a previous episode, but just to make mention of it, we've got one of those relatively inexpensive OD access panels in here. And so Nathan made me just a piece of OSB that's going to be a block out. So when the sheetrock guys come, they're going to drop the sheetrock to this. This is face screwed. We'll pull that out, and then we'll have that access panel. Everywhere I've got a hose bib connection for my Aqua hose bibs, at the back of the hose bib, there's a connection to the PEX line. And in 30 years, if I want to replace that hose bib, how nice will it be to have that access panel?
Right.
No sheetrock cuts, really easy to do everything from the inside. Pop that panel off, full access, put a new one in, we're good to go.
Right.
How about we walk around the corner? We'll meet you in the master bedroom.
Matt, before we walk into the master, let me point out thermostat blocking. Any electronic control panel, including thermostats, humidistats, need blocking because we don't want them to be supported by the drywall.
Right, so the contractor, when he installed this, just put his T-stat wires through some cardboard, but we're going to change that out to a solid.
And notice we've got it marked in red again so that the carpenter knows to come back and block for that.
That's on our list too, those T-stats.
Right.
Now, as we walk into the primary bed, the master bed, what are you thinking about here blocking-wise?
Well, once again, another television.
Yep.
But another secondary thought we've had in master bedrooms specifically is on either side of the master bed, which we know where that is.
Yep.
They may want to have sconce lights for reading.
Yep. And where
So
would you
we-
typically put those at?
Probably a 36 to 42,
Yep.
somewhere in that range,
Yeah.
depending upon the light fixture, so it wouldn't hurt if you move your tape,
Yep.
just to do a block like that
Yep.
on each side of the bed,
Yep.
and then we know we're covered.
Yep, makes sense.
Let's call it right here.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah, so we'll solid block that whole area.
That's
so
right.
Nathan will come back here and hit those for us. Another thing to think about as we're walking through here, let's go into the bath area. One of the things that I've forgotten more than once in my career is solid blocking for bath hardware. A little tight in here, but when you're on the toilet here, you're gonna have that toilet paper holder, and if that thing's in drywall, you got maybe 6 months before those
Right.
drywall anchors start getting wonky. So having that solid blocking for that is perfect. Now, we've got a bunch of solid blocking here in these Eclise pocket doors because either Nathan or the finish carpenter solid block those as well. I like that. So in other words, this metal frame, we filled in the panels with some zip system sheathing. And typically when you're doing that, you're gonna glue those on. You wanna use something like PL Premium that will attach to both metal and wood. Probably these either got temporarily screwed or taped on until that glue dried, but basically I have solid blocking this whole left side. So if we put a towel bar holder or whatever in the future there.
Couple of notes. On the toilet paper holder, we want those about 24 inches to the center of the blocking for the toilet paper holder.
Yep, okay.
And secondly, on
So we're right there, yeah.
pocket door frames, any risk of installing hardware, shelving brackets, anything adjacent to pocket door frames, make sure the hardware installers use nothing more than 1.25 inch screw.
Smart. Yeah, because otherwise you're gonna scrape that door. What's our plan in the future for this access for the Kohler? You know, we have a Kohler electronic thermostatic valve here, which is awesome because we can access this in the future if we ever need it. We're gonna make a door here. What are you thinking about doing for this?
I think
Tim?
similar to what you're doing on the Aqua hose bib access panels, we need a block out of a piece of plywood so that we can drywall to it.
Okay.
And then install a nice, here probably more decorative cabinet front door for the access.
You know what else I've seen? Zach Detmore makes on more than one of his job a cabinet front that basically he mounts a picture to.
Yeah.
So he could actually open the picture on a hinge. Right. That might be kind of fun to do there. Do we want to mark this one as well, Tim?
Yeah, I think so.
So we'll throw a little spray
Just
paint
on
on there.
either side all the way around to get all the valves and the plugs in the frame.
Yeah, I like it.
Yep.
Now we've got wall hung, no, I should say wall mounted Kohler faucets. So these are coming out of the wall.
Right.
Anything special we need to do with those as well?
They're blocked pretty well. I believe that the hardware will hold against the backsplash really well here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We probably do need a block for a towel ring to your left if someone were to want to mount.
Oh yeah, that's what
towel ring there.
That's a great point. Yeah, so that's been already blocked out. I do want to point out, great job by our team. We originally thought 2x6 wall for plumbing, and then realized, oh shoot, if we want to do some recessed medicine cabinets, I think these are actually Kohler brand recessed medicine cabinets. We need that extra depth, so we framed, before the mechanicals start, another 2x2 wall in front of the 2x6. So in effect, this is really more like a 2x8 plus wall to give us that depth.
There's a whole lot going on in this wall.
Yeah, there's a lot going on this wall, that's for sure. As we round the corner to the shower area, we installed our Schluter-KERDI board early, and I really like having all of these shower walls put in at this point, because now when our sheetrock contractor comes, he can put his corner bead on here,
Right.
and then we're totally set up. I don't like seeing the drywall guys putting our backer in, so I like having this in.
That's great. We need to accommodate for a shower door here. Not really sure which side it will hinge from, but you'll notice that behind the KERDI we have on this side 3/4 inch Advantech or X Factor.
Which we put in solid before we got to plumbing.
And on this side we have the same. So as long as the screws are not too long on this side for the pocket door, and they probably can be longer on this side, the hinge for the door can go on either side.
So in effect, where the curb on the shower is, or even if you had curbless, we've got easily a foot on either side, solid blocking top to bottom.
Right.
So really we could hinge this either direction and we'd be totally fine. I would think that it would make most sense to hinge on this right-hand side.
It would, because
so you'd
most
open
often you're coming from
the
this
valves
direction.
Here. Yeah. And the wire that's on the wall, by the way, this is for the Kohler electronic thermostatic valve. Basically, there's a little keypad that you're going to hit, and then so that would make sense that we'd hinge on this side, open that door up, hit the buttons, close the door back up. Let's say if you needed to wait 20 seconds for it to get hot, and then boom, you're good to go. Side note, we had Gary Klein help us with the plumbing layout on this house, and so we should have a very, very fast hot water delivery on this house. Gary did an amazing job. And if you come around the corner here, one last block I want to point out. This is just like in the other room.
Another Aquar hose bib.
Random 1x4 in there. Another Aquar hose bib. That's where the connection is in the wall. So that hose bib is actually shutting off like right in this section of the wall. So it's in the warm part of the house. And then it's a stainless steel body, by the way, so it doesn't transmit heat very well. And when it shuts off into the cavity, and it's got a vacuum breaker, so it's actually dropping all that water back out because it's at a slight angle. So now we don't have any worry about frozen pipes on the outside. And we also don't have a drain valve, which makes it kind of handy, not having to drain these in the wintertime.
One other thing, this is the master closet, by the way, and I want to point out to people that rarely do you know at this phase of the job exactly what your closet layout will be.
Right.
And so there's not a lot of opportunity to do a lot of strategic blocking.
Sure.
However, here, if you look around, I do see that we will probably have shelving along this wall and rod terminations. We have two things to consider. One, we probably do want some blocking on this end for shelving or rods.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we have a vulnerable pipe here that if somebody were to drive a nail right there.
That's a great point.
Right, so we not only do we need metal blocking here.
Where that pipe is, we should probably put
we need wood blocking for the termination of the shelf and the rod.
That's a great point. We don't want an errant screw going in there. So we'll make sure to tell Nathan to put some metal block on there, or some, what do they call the ones that the plumbers use? That's the metal...
Just protective strap. It's like a 16 gauge sheet metal.
Yeah, that's right.
Enough to stop a screw.
As a side note, at my house, I think you know this story, I had a in-wall toilet, and I didn't protect the back of the in-wall toilet, and when the cabinet guy came, he put a screw into the back by accident, found there was no solid blocking there, backed the screw out. Well, now I had a hole in my tank that I didn't find until we filled the water. So I had this leak when the water got turned on that I couldn't find, and we're like, oh my gosh, shut off the water. So whenever we do in-wall toilets, which we don't have any on this house, we typically put a solid piece of sheet metal on the back there. You could just use a 16 gauge, something that's going to prevent that screw from coming in. So be careful about your in-wall toilets and protect the back of the tank wherever possible.
That's a great point. Anywhere we intend to drill or use longer screws in a wall, make sure that there's no vulnerable plumbing or piping behind it.
Yeah, that's right. Let's meet these guys out at the staircase, and we'll look at that next critical area.
Okay. Well, of course, we've got temporary railing up here for safety, but our permanent railing, which in some cases might be on the wall, would need substantial blocking. 32 to 38 inches off the stair nosing all the way up the wall with 2x6.
Yeah, so in other words, you take the nosing of the stair and then go up to 32 to 36.
Right.
And obviously we'd be fine here because I got this big PSL. But on this nosing, if I was doing one, I'd want to put a solid block in here because you can see I don't have anything.
That's right.
However, we're not needing to do that on this job because of this, Tim. You want to explain what we got here?
Well, it's a little ankle, what I call an ankle wall. It encapsulates the stair treads on both sides, and the decorative railing will come up off of that and be mounted here. Yep. So it will go all the way up, turn, and return to the wall. What you really want in this case is lots of solid base blocking to screw the posts into.
Yeah, that's right. So let me explain briefly. This wall here is a much less expensive detail when we get into the finished carpentry phase. We can still use a hardwood tread. It's encapsulated. Now we don't have that outside tread, all that additional finished carpentry work. So it's going to look great, but this is frankly a detail that's a little less expensive to execute compared to, let's say, my house where I had that open tread coming out the side and an open rail. And these rails are typically a little less expensive as well. As we walk upstairs, how about we come up and talk about the two beds upstairs. We'll meet you upstairs.
Okay, Matt, this is the game room or upstairs play room.
That's a nice space, Tim. Now that all the insulation's in and you can kind of get a feel for what it's going to look like, it's a lot of space, good natural light. What are you thinking about blocking-wise up here?
Well, similar to downstairs in the dining room, we've got a little game room table theoretically positioned here in this little nook. And so once again, the electrician is blocked for his chandelier here.
That's good.
Right?
I like that.
Also, one consideration we didn't talk about downstairs, which is something to think about through the whole house, is some sort of blocking for window covering. And of course, in this house, we're fortunate that we have substantial LVL headers over all the windows for plenty of attachment for any window covering hardware.
Yeah, it's hard to see because the guys, when they insulated, put the covering on there, but there's a full LVL there, so there's nothing to worry about here. We got solid blocking on that. As a side note, check out our other episode though. We do have zip R6 on the outside. So even though this is a 2x4 wall with a solid LVL header, I've got R6 on the back side of that. So if you figure wood's about R1 per inch, we've got R6.6 actually outside. That header is around R10. So yes, it's a lower insulation value, but it's not bad.
Nice thermal break.
It's a good thermal break, that's right. Now what am I seeing the red paint over here for?
Again, another television. And this will probably be a fairly large one because this is where the family will probably view a lot of sports games or whatever.
Look at that cool built-in that Benchmark's going to do here.
Right.
I like that.
So you see there's a lot of space for probably an 80-inch television here.
Yeah, that's really nice.
And that's a lot of weight. So we need to make sure substantial blocking here.
Yeah. As a side note too, I'm noticing, Tim, that you've got a plug-in. So we could use, of course, wireless if you wanted to, but a plug-in Ethernet in this spot too, which is smart to have for the future as well.
Right.
Bathrooms. Why don't we walk around to this bath and closet. All right, so in this bedroom, or really both bedrooms, we walk through the closets first to get to the bathrooms. So we got this really nice walk-in closet. Stairs to the attic are above us. I like this layout that Steve did. This is good. Do we need to think about any solid rod blocking in here as well, Tim?
Well, again, it wouldn't hurt. I don't think there's any plumbing to consider in this wall, but there's lots of electrical.
Yeah.
There's certainly conduit to run wires from attic to attic. So it wouldn't hurt to do some blocking across here for rods and shelves. Same thing on both sides.
Well, you said it briefly, but let's mention it because I don't think we've talked about it in any other videos. This orange pipe you're seeing there, we often jokingly call it Smurf tube because a lot of times they're blue. This one is connecting the attic on the garage, which is right on the other side here, with the attic above us, and it's just an empty pipe between attics. We also did that between the back living room attic and the garage, and then the back living room attic and our little mechanical closet where our Sonos equipment's gonna be, so that we could in the future run Ethernet or who knows whatever in between those. They're capped at both ends, so they're air sealed and fire stopped, but this is a really good future proofing to think about. How am I gonna get access between attics or spaces? I really like thinking about that, Tim.
Yep.
And then as we come into this space, I'm noticing you've already mentioned or put some hardware blocking in and thought about that.
Holder here.
And then we've got our hardware blocks here.
Towel ring there, and towel bars on this side.
Yep. And then we got this guy here. So I think we're in pretty good shape on those. The second bathroom around the corner is going to be pretty much the same. Why don't we head out to the garage, Tim? We've got a couple things out there we need to talk about.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll see you in the garage. Actually, Tim, before we go in the garage, there's something I forgot to mention downstairs. If you look at our bottom plates on the house, there's some bottom plates that are kind of sunk below the subfloor. You have to check out our other episode, but we have an insulated subfloor detail. And some places in the house, like this wall here, was a wall that was framed after the subfloor is in place. And then there's a few walls though that are like this that are sunk down. It's because this is a bearing wall. This has some load bearing. So this had to be put in before the installation of the subfloor. As a result, we had to add some specific blocking because of door trim. So in other words, when this door gets installed, when this trim comes down, I'm thinking about, okay, I've got my casing. How wide's my casing going to be? When that casing came down, now I don't have any place to nail my base molding if this block wasn't here. So we went through the whole house and said, all right, do I have enough blocking to nail my baseboard in, knowing that my trim is going to come all the way down to the floor? So that's something to keep in mind, is think about your base and trim around doors. Now let's walk into the garage, because the garage has some interesting details and actually has an additional benefit that most houses don't have with the way we built this. So we talked about it in a prior episode. This wall here is solid sheathed with zip system sheathing. And if you were to look up past my plywood, we sheathed this wall solid prior to framing the garage. So that zip system sheathing is a total air barrier and really a fire barrier as well between the house and the garage. So on the other side of this wall is where we started the video, where the kitchen cabinets are. This wall being solid sheathed now means that I've got a perfect air barrier. And I know this episode's not about this, but look at our Jake Bruton one thing for one hole detail. All the wires that went through that sheathing, Rick, our electrician, drilled one hole and then put one wire in it. Even the low volt guy did that, and the mechanical contractor and the plumber did the exact same thing. Where that water line runs through that wall, there's just one hole. Where that duct runs through, that's our kitchen makeup air, and that's our kitchen exhaust. One hole for one thing. So now I'm solid sheathed all the way across this wall, which is really nice. And Tim, tell these guys what we're doing in the garage here, which is a little bit different than most garages.
Well, we're going to panel the garage at some point as a finished surface instead of drywall.
Yeah.
But we do have to consider, we probably will have garage cabinets, which, treated like the kitchen, needs blocking also.
Yep.
And notice how it's marked for upper cabinets to the right of the span panel,
Yep.
lower cabinets all the way across.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're going to solid block that. Nathan will come get those.
I mean,
as well.
obviously, we still have at least another day of blocking to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, at least a couple hours anyways.
Yeah.
So this is our garage span panel. We have another outdoor span panel next to our Champion automatic transfer switch that's on the outside. And I do notice that Rick did a real nice job where we got wires coming through. He's got a real big stud shoe, so we don't hit that. But one nice thing about the garage is that we're not going to do any sheetrock in the garage whatsoever. We're going to do a finished 3/4 plywood.
Right.
You know, kind of like a pre-finished cabinet interior type product on this whole garage, which means we're going to have really good blocking kind of everywhere in the garage. But as we come to the front, there's a couple things that we want to make mention. Tell us what's going on with this wire and this pipe sticking out here.
Well,
Tim.
on both sides of the garage, we're pre-wired for an electric car charger. So we will need blocking and a J-box for the car charger itself. We already have the car chargers, but they don't get mounted until trim.
Yeah.
We also have a hose bib in the garage for whatever you might need, washing out the garage, washing your car, whatever. But that will also need some blocking because we'll end up, this is a temporary mount, we'll end up with a more permanent faucet here that actually screws to a backing plate.
Yeah, I like it. And as a side note, you notice the sheathing stops here. This is where the envelope of the house stops, and basically this sheathing turns the corner here and heads to my front porch. This wall here doesn't have any conditioned space on the other side, so we actually will need to block this too if we want this to be flush across. Yeah. So that's why these blocks aren't in yet. We're going to fur this wall out so it's flush with the front of this zip system sheathing. Then we'll solid block that. And then I think we're good to go. I think we gave the basics. Was there anything in our list that we missed here, Tim, that we didn't have on this house that we wanted to make mention of?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much touched on everything except one thing. Most of what we'll do in this house is conventional blocking for conventional cabinets. Periodically on many of the homes we do, the cabinetry that we hang is floating. Some of the shelving that we hang is floating. And then for traditional blocking, since there's not floor support, may not be enough. And so it may require metal brackets to actually hang those shelves and cabinets on.
Yeah, great point. Another thing I want to mention at this point too that's important to remember is most typical American homes have 1/2 inch sheetrock on the walls and 5/8 on the ceiling, but we're going to 5/8 everywhere. And so when you're talking to your builder's first source rep about jam depth, especially your interior doors, you want to make sure that you tell them that you've got 5/8 if you do, or 1/2 inch if you don't, so that you can get your jam thickness correct. Because we've got our full interior trim package on order already, so that when we get finished with our roughly 2-week process, so when we get finished hanging our USG sheetrock brand, we're totally good to go. Everything from the trim package will work correctly, and then when the finished carpenters come, we're ready to go.
Ready to go.
Good stuff. I'm super excited to get into the trim and cabinet phase. The house starts looking like a real house. People that don't know anything about construction can't visualize the house in this stage. But once the trim goes on the interior of the house, the doors get set, the cabinets come in, it starts looking like a real house.
Right.
And this is a little bit of a different project. You know, this is a speculative project. We don't have an owner attached yet. We're going to put it on the market probably in the springtime. So, you know, we want this house to look as awesome as possible. We're not used to doing this. We only do custom homes. Tim and I, over the last 20 years, we've been in business. So doing something like this is a little different for us. You saw the signs. This was our show house for Build Show Live. We're not advocating you as a builder consider doing spec houses. This is a very special case for us being a show house and having sponsors. So don't take this as our advice to you that you should build speculative houses. Use this as advice for building really good custom homes that you're going to have an emphasis on durability, indoor air quality, longevity. We even talked a lot about remodelability, which is something that Tim and I love to talk about. So big thanks to you, Tim, for passing on your wisdom. Guys, if you're not currently following the series, go back and rewatch everything to get to this point. We spent a lot of time and effort really getting to this phase, and we're I feel like we're like at the 2/3 point on this build.
I think that's right. Yep.
Guys, big thanks to BFS for sponsoring this project. They've been fabulous to work with, and as we get into this next phase, we're really going to see the house come to life. You know, we've seen their amazing renderings, 3D fly through the house. It's going to be really fun to make that come to life. With that being said, catch up with the past episodes, and we'll see you next time on the Reisinger Build.